To Business Success Tips, where you learn to make more money in less time. Hopefully, have a lot more fun. My name is Paul Sanneman. I'm founder of Contractor Staffing Source. We help contractors build great teams. My guest today is Robert Clickinbeard from Wilson 360. So, Robert, what do you guys do?
We do coaching with landscape, with different types of trade companies, all different sizes, and we really just help them grow and just make them better companies, more profitable, bring in extra revenue. So
Okay, so I asked, to me, choosing a coach is like choosing a spouse. I mean, it's a long-term committed relationship, right? So, do you have any advice? Say you're a landscape company, you think I need a coach. How do you find one? How do you vet them? Because I don't think people know. They haven't done it before.
no, it's a definitely a good thing because a lot of people sort of try and play themselves as coaches. I always use the analogy of sports. I was a big sports guy, soccer, rugby. I always have had more respect the people who had a great playing career, and I
Hmm.
think that's the same with business coaching. If they've been successful in business, either growing, scaling, selling, whatever that looks like, then those are the sort of questions you need to ask is, hey, what's been your track record in
Right.
business?
Because unfortunately, in America, some people say if you can't do, teach, right? So it's like,
True. So true.
so
But there's so many people out there that try and pass themselves, and maybe maybe they've worked for somebody, and then they take a coaching certificate, and then they pass themselves off as coach. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think I would trust them with making some key
Well,
decisions.
I've been a coach for like 50 years, and one of the biggest problems as a coach, and maybe you can tell me how you deal with it, is a lot of these guys that start companies as craftspeople. I mean, they start mowing lawns at a landscape company. And so how do you help someone make the transition between a craftsman and entrepreneur?
That's probably the biggest transition I see is that people really struggle, and especially when it gets to that, maybe it depends on the trade, but from that 3 to 5 million range, to
Hmm.
try and get over the hump where they have to take themselves out of the business and rely on people in the business. And it comes down to people. If you find the right people but below you that you can either coach up to be able to take away some of that day-to-day stuff, then it allows you to pull yourself a little bit away from the business and work on the business.
Hmm.
And I think that's the key piece is the finding the right people.
Yeah, I know. I know. As a coach, I'm one of those like defining moments for me when I had a guy and we were working on like profit and loss and projections and marketing plans. And I said, John, you don't value this. He goes, Paul, I took off work to do this.
That's so funny. I mean, so true. Yeah, there's a lot of people. I mean, people think they can't afford coaches. I would say, well, I think the quicker you learn from some of the best people to get over that hump, I think the better. And it's just trying to allocate time because I found that with trade businesses, especially, if you're if you're working in the weeds and you're trying to put out the fires and have multiple different hats on, it's
Mhm.
really tough for you to work on the business. That's where you
Right.
need somebody nudging you.
I mean, so many people define work as dollars per hour, right? They try to say, well, you know, strategic planning, how much does that pay an hour? I go, probably way more than you're making doing anything else, right?
So true. So
So,
true.
question I have, what do you see? We work with a lot of companies. What do you see as the major issues that the contractors need to deal with and you help them deal with that gets them on track and converts them from a craftsman to an entrepreneur?
Um, I mean, there's a few things in there. I mean, certainly understanding your financials more. I think that's a big piece of it.
Mhm.
Uh, trying to hire the right people, trying to hire A players. Uh, really finding out where your true passion is. Is your passion more operations, on sales, strategy? Um, but I think there's a lot of different aspects in there, and I think really just trying to figure out. taking a step back in your business and taking yourself out of the weeds and really just figuring out where those bottlenecks are, what the bottlenecks stopping you from getting to that next level.
Right. Do you believe in the traction model where there's the visionary and the implementer?
Yep. Yep. I use that in my business. I'm not a certified coach, but I practice the EOS and done scaling up as well. And a lot of great principles in both the scaling up book and the traction book.
I agree because what happens is, I'm a visionary and I'm definitely not, you know, an implementer because I hate all that stuff. It's like, I'd rather sell than work on all that stuff. And so I think what was good about that book for me is that you can't be everything, right? And if you're the visionary, admit you're a visionary and hire somebody to do all the stuff you don't like to do so you can get it done. And what happens is, I tell people you can't build a company without people. And I've had people say, "Oh, people are expensive." I go, "You can't make money without them, right?" I mean,
Well, I think it's the people part, which is important, but also, developing processes, procedures.
right,
Well, I think that's super important so that you can have those consistent practices, whatever size you're at.
right. And so, since you're using the sports analogy, I say there's a couple kinds of company. There's a sports team analogy, where you're good as your last year. They're always scouting. They're always looking for people, and your performance keeps you working. And then there's the federal government, which until you do something really crazy, you don't get fired, right?
Yeah, so true. I used to
And
I used to work for the government, so I know that very
you
well.
know that one about. And to me, I mean, I think it's hard for people when they're building a team. I mean, I think what the hardest thing is to let people go that aren't high performers, right? I'm sure you've coached people that they should let somebody go, but they spend a year trying to pull it off, right?
Yeah, because they're scared. They're scared of what the gap that's being left, and it really what is uh, I think only apparent to them afterwards is that they held on to them too long, and it was actually a detriment to your other employees in the
Right,
company. So what I found is that if you have a great culture, then people will step up if somebody leaves.
right. And
They
I
feel that
think
void.
one thing, I found this when we can tell me, it doesn't, one bad person that doesn't isn't a cultural fit can really do devastating damage to a company that may have 15 people. Have you noticed that?
I've unfortunately made that mistake many a time. I've held on to people too long, and it's when I eventually let them go, people turn around to me and say, "Why did it take you so long?"
Right. Because what happens is you establish a new low, right? For lack of a better term. Because
Hmm.
say that person doesn't support the company, he only lies occasionally, he doesn't treat clients well. And then people are going, well, is that the standard now? Right?
Yeah, people think that's now the norm. I
Right.
can agree with that, and it's just the wrong message to give to your employees.
So how do you support somebody? I'm sure you've had this. I had as a coach. Support somebody in the person who's not good enough to keep and not bad enough to fire. The world's worst employee.
I go through a interesting exercise where I'll grade people. I'll use a special chart and I'll look at are they living the core values? Are they productive? And I'll usually get them into the A, B, C, D player
Right.
scenario. And the people that sit in the B category, I'll challenge the owner and say, "Hey, what's it going to take to get that employee up to an A player? What's that development plan look like?" And then what are you? I'll say to the owner if they're sitting in that C box, then I'll say if what's an easier route? Do you train up that person to get to an A, or do you rip the band-aid off and replace that person with an A player? What's going to take
Right.
that shorter period of time or less obstacles?
I know I used to listen to Jim Rohn a lot, and he said you can't send your ducks to Eagle School, right? It just doesn't work.
No, that's so true. So true.
We,
But
we've
yeah,
been there.
it's interesting I'll do that when I typically go into companies. I'll do that exercise, and then usually within a year, we'll redo that exercise. And there's a definitely a bigger shift towards more those A and B players. I usually
Right.
say say you want to have at least 80% of your A players in your company.
Right. Now, I know as a coach, how do you work with a company on like hourly? Because I've seen some coaching companies have like 50 coaches and it's all systems based. Some coaching company has one guy and it's a guy based. So how does your company fit in and who's your like ideal client and how would they know you're right for them?
Um, I mean, usually, we look for sort of certainly larger companies that have the time to dedicate towards putting some of the practices in place. But I think the ones that I enjoy working with the most are the ones that are committed, that are disciplined, that's going to set aside the time, um, and they'll actually listen to me, and then I'll put a lot of those practices in place so that when we come back to them next month or at the end of it, every quarter, they'll have done 80, 90% of your, that rocks, keeping to
Hmm.
that traction
Right,
model. Whereas the companies that are, have the excuses, they're always being pulled back into the weeds. It's tough for them to actually get some traction just because they're still dealing with that day-to-day headache.
right. So how do you onboard people? Let's say people listening. I think people maybe like speed dating. They should talk to a couple of coaches because unfortunately, some people they hear about one coach and they go there and they go, it wasn't ever great, but it wasn't terrible. It's like again, not bad enough to fire him, but not good enough. I'm excited about him. I think people should interview at least a couple to find out. To me, do they trust the guy or woman? Do they like them? Somebody they'd have to dinner. I mean, it's a relationship, right?
Yep, no, I agree. I mean, if you need to, think through, would I want to sit down and have a beer with that coach? But I would
Right.
recommend, yeah, at least two or three coaches, uh, interview them just as much as they're interviewing you. Get referrals from look at their reviews online. Um, look at if they're in a certain industry, there's certainly some industry associations that
Mhm.
recommend certain people.
Right.
Do your research because you want that. Effectively, it's like a marriage or a partnership that should last for
Right.
years.
And I
So
agree. I mean, what I think people do is this is my coaching experience. I think it's relationship based, not systems based. Not that don't you use systems. Systems are important, but if the relationship isn't there, the systems don't make the difference. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. I, I think a key point about the relationship piece, though, is they shouldn't necessarily be friends because you don't want a coach agreeing with everything that
Right.
the owner's saying. The coach should be able to push back and say what they want, even if it means they're telling, you know, the company or the owner that their baby's ugly.
Yeah.
Um, you need that straight feedback.
I think that's trust based on relationship. Because I know the toughest part I had about a coaching is you've got to tell, I mean, you want to tell people what they need to hear, but you don't want to get fired, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
It's that fine line. You can say whatever you want. It's how you say it.
yeah, absolutely. So, Robert, if people, like what they're hearing and they want to get in touch with you, how do you find people? What's your onboarding process? How do you charge for what you do? Tell me a little more.
Yeah, we contact us through our website, wilson-360.com. We usually do an initial assessment where people can come in to do a score to see, how they match up. We have some different measures in there, so they'll fill that form out. We'll do a conversation showing where the weak points are. We typically charge a retainer model based on whether you're working with one coach or we have different coaches that are teaching different disciplines like fractional CFO work, talent management. So if you're working with multiple coaches, then it might be a higher fee. Whereas if you're working with one coach, then it's going to be a lower fee. But that retainer model, we're looking for typically a 6 to 12 months engagement.
Okay. Is it run like 2 to 10,000 a month or does it vary?
Yeah, it's typically 2 to 10 thousand a month, and
Okay.
our guarantee is that if you don't get value from what we provide, then pay us whatever you want. If you think we've given you no value that month, then pay us zero. Never happened, but
Oh, I know what you mean.
that's
I
our
always,
guarantee.
I always gave people a money back guarantee. Nobody ever took it because I wouldn't take them if there weren't a person that I wanted to work with and vice versa, right?
Exactly.
So how did they get in touch with you, Robert?
Yeah, either through LinkedIn, Robert Clickinbeard on LinkedIn, or through Wilson. 𝗀𝗂𝗿.com. All my contact information is in there.
Okay.
But yeah,
They actually get to talk to you?
get to talk to me.
That's great. I like
You
that a
can
lot. Okay.
if they can understand my accent, we'll
I
get
love
on.
your accent. It's way cooler than most coaches.
I try. I go back to Scotland once a year just to, top it up a little bit.
And I know, I mean, I spent my daughter got married in Edinburgh. I love Edinburgh. Um, and so I can relate a little bit. And I think I love the sports analogy because, you want to learn from other people's mistakes. I was thinking, stay in business as long as you can afford to pay for your mistakes. And some of those can be pretty expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about sports, and I think there's so much correlation. I wrote a book called The Iron Man Mindset for Entrepreneurs, and I just talked about the mindset and tying into sports and going through challenges, going through roadblocks, setting targets. So there's
Cool.
so much correlation there.
I can relate that because I'm in Hilo with Kona's on the other side of the island, but I've been to the Ironman a couple of times. I relate. Thanks, bro. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.